That night, the weather worsened. Lying in bed in the manager's house, Shackleton listened to snow driving against the window. Had they been caught in that blizzard, nothing could have saved them. Years later, Shackleton would describe the mystical sensation of a guiding presence during the crossing.
I know that during that long and racking march of 36 hours over the unnamed mountains and glaciers of South Georgia, it seemed to me often that we were 4, not 3. I said nothing to my companions, but afterwards Worsley said to me, "Boss, I had a curious feeling that there was another person with us."
The fourth man, I suppose, was the man above. They must be deeply religious at the back of everything. They must.
The night they arrived in Stromness, Worsley set out to pick up the 3 men back at King Haakon Bay. 3 days later, Shackleton, Worsley and Crean headed for Elephant Island in a borrowed ship. "60 miles short of Elephant Island, the rescue ship was brought to a halt by their old enemy, ice. There was no choice but to abandon the attempt. Over the next 3 months, Shackleton made increasingly frantic efforts to reach his men. At last, in late August, the Chilean government loaned him a small tug. Shackleton, Worsley and Crean set out on their 4th rescue bid. Elephant Island. The rescue party was now at least 10 weeks overdue. Orderlies detailed the survivors' hardships.
August 26th, 1916. Another wretched day. Very dull and draining. What little seal meat we have left is tainted, for we've picked it over so often that nothing but the most decomposed remains.
The 22 castaways had passed a sunless winter in cramped shelter contrived from their 2 overturned boats.
22 of us lived in a tiny, dark little hut. The weather was just appalling. Blizzards and snowstorms almost the whole time. The great difficulties, of course, was lack of water. There was plenty of frozen water all round, but you can't suck ice at those temperatures. If you do, it blisters your lips and your tongue as though you'd sucked a piece of red-hot iron. So we used to take a few chips of ice in our sleeping bags with us at night in an old tobacco tin. And if you lay very still all night, a few of those chips would melt and you'd have about a teaspoonful of water for your breakfast in the morning. Of course, food was very short. We had very little except a little seal and penguin whenever they came up. And Marston, who was with us, had a little penny cookery book from which he used to read 1 recipe per night. We all lay around very quietly and very solemnly, suggesting in turns improvements and alterations. Then when the last man had finished, we went to sleep dreaming of the second helpings we'd refused when we were back home. You know, it's difficult to realize how hungry a man can be. When we'd eaten our rations and such seals and penguins as we could catch, then, without any enmity, we looked at one another.
Each day, Wild roused the survivors from their bags with the cry, "Lash up and stow. The boss may come today." But by the end of August, even Wild doubted that Shackleton would return. In fact, Shackleton had already made 3 attempts, only to be beaten back each time by the weather and ice. Worsley noted how frustration took its toll.
The wear and tear of this period was dreadful. To Shackleton, it was little less than maddening. Lines scored themselves on his face more deeply day by day. On our 3rd journey, he was grey-haired.
On Elephant Island, his men had given him up.
The idea of a ship ever coming now is getting more and more remote, as preparations are being pushed along for sending one of our 2 boats. Wild and 4 other members are to go in the Dudley Docker and will make their way from island to island of the South Shetlands until they reach Deception Island, about 250 miles away. It is a big undertaking.
On August the 30th, 1916, the men were gathered in their hut for a lunch of boiled seal backbone. Marston and Hurley remained outside, shelling limpets they'd picked in the shallows. There was a sudden commotion. According to Macklin,
Marston burst in asking if it would not be a good thing to send up smoke. Wilde called out to know what was the matter, and Marston replied with the magic words, "A ship!"
from the deck of the tug Yelcho, Shackleton scanned Cape Wild through binoculars, counting the figures pouring out of the hut onto the beach. Frank Worsley vividly remembered the effect.
2, 5, 7. And then an exultant shout. "They're all there, skipper. They're all safe." He turned to me, his face showing more emotion then than I'd ever known it show before. Crean joined us, and we were all unable to speak.
All hands were safe. Not a life had been lost. But new ice threatened. Shackleton would not even come ashore. The men were snatched to safety. An ecstatic welcome awaited the expedition in Chile. Despite being at war with Britain, the German community raised flags of celebration. The crew of the Endurance returned to a world unrecognizable as the one they'd left 2 years before.
When Shackleton and his men had left England, the Great War had just started, and their minds were still in Edwardian England. But when they returned to civilization now, they'd entered the modern world, and the war, as it turned out, was beyond their comprehension. When they asked Sørle, the Norwegian manager, they said, "Well, what's happened in the world? And when was the war over?" And he said, "The war isn't over. It's still going on. Millions of men are being killed. The world is going mad." And because of the dreadful carnage on the battlefields in Europe, Shackleton rather disappeared. And in any case, he was the wrong kind of hero for England at the time. The British wanted dead heroes, and they had lots and lots of dead heroes.
I suspect in 1918 the death of so many people in the trenches in the war made them feel that they had been, I could have said, nearly cowards, that they avoided 2 years of the war and they were lucky to be alive.
On their return, most of the men went to the war. Hurley went off to photograph the trenches. Tim McCarthy, a veteran of the Caird, died 6 weeks after enlisting, manning a gun in the Channel. Wordie and McIlroy were badly wounded. McNish emigrated to New Zealand, working briefly on the docks, before suffering a crippling injury. Members of the expedition were awarded the Polar Medal. But Shackleton withheld this honor from McNish and 3 others. The Carpenter's brief rebellion on the ice cost him dear.